Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, do that thing down below. So this is the long-term review of the Heidenau K60 Ranger, which I have right here. And I'm going to be talking about this tire at multiple intervals through the almost 5,000 miles I have on it. So around the 2 to 3 and then around 4,500 miles, I will talk about this tire, my experience on it, some of the positives, some of the negatives that I've experienced. So if this is a tire you're interested in, then stick around. Now, one quick note, remember this is on a small adventure bike in the size of 130/80/17. If you have a large adventure bike that weighs a ton or a quarter ton, whatever it is, you're gonna have a little bit different experience than maybe I had on a lighter bike that weighs below 400 pounds. So not to say that some of this may not be applicable, but keep that in mind as you're looking through this. The longevity of the tire might be a little bit different, and also its performance off-road may be a little bit different. So if this is a tire that interests you, stick around and I will hit it at all of the different intervals of the use. To start with, I'll go with the front tire. The front tire is really, the carcass is super stiff. This is the hardest tire I've ever mounted on the front. Normally with front tires, I can lube up the bead, I can lube up the rim and push the first bead on. I don't have to spoon it on. I could not do that with this tire. I had to spoon on the first bead. And then when I got to the second bead, I had gotten my tube put in there all nice and neat. It was tough. It's the hardest front tire I've ever installed. This is a very stiff tire. The sidewall is extremely stiff. I will tell you, because I mount my tires myself, this was the hardest tire I've ever mounted. And I've done the Heidenau K60 Scout. That tire mounted pretty easily. Compared to this was a bear. Like the front tire, I'm usually able to get that first bead to push on without having to spoon it, just with some lube. Not even close on this. It took some work just to spoon on the first bead, and then to get that last bit up and over was tough. We were at a 2,000 mile update here on the Heidenau K60 Ranger. Start with the front tire. It still has its whiskers, so you can tell I don't ride hard. I'm not trying to scrape pegs or anything like that. I'm just trying to get from point A to point B, basically across pavement to get to the dirt where I enjoy riding the most. So far, front tire has, once it got broke in, it's been really pretty good. The breaking in period, it took at least 500 miles for the carcass to break in. I think the rubber itself, once I got it on some dirt road, it took all the slickness off of it and started sticking to the road just fine. But the carcass was really hard. It took a while for it. Once it broke in, it started tracking better, but those first 500 miles, when I was riding off-road for several hundred of those, it was not tracking well. So I did lower the tire pressure. I think right now I'm running around 30 PSI on the front. That seems to be pretty good. I could likely go a little bit lower, but I've been riding section 3 of the Mid-Atlantic BDR today, and it is really rocky chunky in some sections, and not big rocks, but just sharp rocks sticking out of the ground. So I don't want to pinch flat and I don't want to damage my wheels. So I'm going to continue to run around 30 PSI. So far, with the 2,000 miles I have on the front tire, it barely looks worn. I really think that I'll get 8,000 to 10,000 miles out of this front tire, which is really good because it is so hard to mount. Now, the one thing I will say is I'm on a smaller ADV bike, maybe on a bigger, heavier bike. If you're riding a lot faster, a lot more interstate, a lot more highway, it might behave a little bit differently than it does on this bike. But as far as having a knobby tire up front, it's tracked through the mud well enough. So I've been perfectly happy with the performance of this tire, considering how hard the carcass was once it broke in, but it had to get broken. 2,000 mile look at the rear tire. What I can say is it's wearing pretty well. There's still a lot of chunk to this at 2,000 miles. I thought it was going to wear a little bit faster. Now, the one thing I have noticed about this tire, and I've been riding on areas that have sharp rocks, is it has taken some gashes in the tread and it's got some cuts in it. And I don't know if that's maybe because the tread is a little bit harder. I mean, it doesn't feel that hard to the squeeze, but it's definitely got some cuts in it. I have about 4,500 miles on these tires. I will really want to wrap up the review of them. I think I've gotten about as much experience as I'm going to get on these in the varying conditions. And as we get to fall and things start wrapping up with riding, there's not going to be as much or as intensive riding. So we'll just go ahead and talk about this now and get it wrapped up. So the front tire, it's with the 4,500 miles on it, it's been wearing very evenly. I haven't noticed any cupping on the tread blocks, so that's been really good. The one thing that I keep talking about is the break-in for this tire was about 500 miles. I had to keep it underinflated. I actually think that both the front and rear tire would perform better running 2 to 4 psi lower than what you would on other knobby tires, just because the carcass is so incredibly hard. One of the things I've noticed about this tire is in deep, loose gravel or just loose conditions, rocks over the top of hard pack, it doesn't track as well as some other tires that I've had. It doesn't have the same type of precision of going exactly where I want it. It has a tendency to wander a little bit. Maybe that's my riding out here. I don't know. That's just something I've noticed with some of the other knobbies that I've ran, and another knobby I was using earlier in the year. It tracked a little bit better than this. It's not a big deal, but it's just something, if you're running at pace and you haven't completely aired down, I noticed that it was drifting a bit. So not a big deal. Mud wise, I found that it tracked actually really well through the mud and there was no slipping. Now, I wasn't going through deep mud holes. It was just mud on the top of the surface of the road that I had to cross over. Yeah, I was very confident in going through that. Didn't feel any slippage or any issues with the mud. The tires have tracked well. They've performed well on the road, and I haven't felt the knobs. I think the way the knobs are designed is I haven't felt the knobs squirm or flex at all cornering, and I haven't felt any slippage at all out of the front tire. I have ridden a lot in the rain, and I have had no issues with this tire. It's stuck, it's done just fine. Of course, I'm not riding hard or anything else like that. I'm very conservative when I ride in the rain. I haven't had any issues, no concerns. So nothing that came to my attention that there's an issue with this front tire. With the rear tire, experience has been similar to the front. With the 4,500 miles on it, there's still a fair amount of tread left. I'll probably be able to get 600-700 more miles out of it. It really depends on if braking, I start seeing diminished braking, if it starts locking up, especially off-road, or if I'm breaking it loose pretty quickly off-road, then I'll probably replace it. But 4,500 miles was pretty easy on this, and that is about a 70-30 split of on-road to off-road. I did a lot of on-road riding just to get out to this off-road areas. The use on this tire, the off-road that I've been doing, is on the Mid-Atlantic BDR, which is a mix of rocky terrain, a little bit of muddy terrain, gravel, and then pavement as well. So that's where I've used this tire. Like I said before, the break-in period is about 500 miles. I normally run around 36 PSI. I think if I had ran it around 32 PSI for about a couple hundred miles, it would have broke in the carcass a little bit better. I just don't like doing that because I don't want to risk getting a pinch flat or just damaging my wheels from hitting something hard. So I really have some issues with that. Overall, tracking of the tire basically followed the front. This isn't a powerful enough bike to be able to rip this tire up and break it loose very easily. I did notice that this thing really holds traction well. It took a lot of effort to break it loose. I'd have to be in some really soft terrain or really loose terrain, and even then it wouldn't break loose for very long before it would start picking up traction. So from a traction standpoint, this tire has been really good. Going through mud, the mud that I've done, the little bit that I've done, track fine. Even when I tried to rip in that, it wanted to grab. It really wanted to get traction. It wasn't just spinning up. So I liked it from that standpoint. Wet roads, I did a lot of riding in the rain, like I mentioned before, on the front tire. Same thing with this. Never had any issues with it locking up from the braking, and I never had any issues with it breaking loose, throttling up. Of course, I'm riding conservatively. No slippage in corners, nothing like that. So I have been perfectly comfortable riding this tire in really wet, rainy conditions. The road handling of this tire has been fine. I still have the whiskers on the edges because I'm not leaning it all that hard. I just like to enjoy my ride, and I'm not trying to race through the roads, so it's not leaned over a lot. But when I do lean it, I don't feel any squirm out of this side tread on the rear tire. I've had other knobby tires where when they start getting worn down some, you really start feeling squirm on these side lugs as you lean it over. And so I had no squirm, no bending, no slipping or anything out of this. But again, keep in mind, small adventure bike, lighter adventure bike, low horsepower. On a bigger bike, higher horsepower, your experience might be different, but that's what mine has been. The question that I think is the best one to ask and then answer is, would I use these tires again? The front tire will last at least 2 rear tires, so of course I'm going to continue to use that tire until it's worn out. I don't know that I would put that front tire back on again. There's some other knobby tires that I've used that I prefer, but it's not terrible. If for some reason I couldn't get the other knobby tire, I would consider putting this one on. I've been happy enough with it. It just hasn't performed as well as some of the other knobby tires that I've used. The rear tire, mostly because the carcass is so dang hard, I don't know that I would use this, because it's getting it mounted is a problem. But if I have a roadside repair I've got to do, taking this tire off and putting it back on is really challenging, and that's not a fight I want to do off-road for this rear tire when there's other tires that perform equally as well. I would consider going with a Heidenau K60 Scout on the rear in this tire size, because it doesn't have that center strip. It's an open block design, which might be what I do, is I use that tire with this front tire. So when I go to replace this, I probably will put on a K60 Scout once my other mostly worn out rear tires are done. But that's my thoughts on this tire. If you have any questions about it, leave that in the comments below. If you have your own experience on this tire, leave that in the comments below. Yeah, so that's just been my experience. I just wanted to share that with you based on all the different types of riding that I've done on this tire in a very short period of time. Yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily pick this tire first, but I would consider it to be an adequate backup tire if I couldn't get exactly what I wanted. So thanks for watching. Get out, do some riding, ride safe, and I will see you out there.